Marcellus Wiley is set to join us, the former All-Pro defensive end and host of More To It podcast on the Dan Patrick Podcast Network, available wherever you listen to your podcast. This week, he tells us why LeBron's not loving the game the same as he used to, why Joe Burrow may cruise to another Super Bowl appearance, and why everyone says Happy New Year wrong. Where do you want to start with that? How about we get it wrong by not saying Happy New Year's?
Well, actually, that's how we get it wrong. Happy New Year's. Like, we're about to just go from 2022 to 2023, 2024, 2025. Like, it's only 1 year. And it caught me off guard, too. My wife was just eye-rolling me December 31st. I'm like, oh, walking up to everyone, Happy New Year's, Happy New Year's. And she finally just tapped me on the shoulders like, you know you're getting that wrong. And I was like, what? And she was like, dude, are you trying to make New Year more than 1 year? And once I looked at it, of course, I didn't give her credit in the moment, but I had to take a step back. And now I'm just counting everybody who gets it wrong, including you, Dan. Happy New Year.
Yeah. Well, I say Happy New Year, but I was wondering when you were correcting people, then maybe I was getting it wrong by saying Happy New Year.
Not even confident in it. See, that's the point. I don't think we get it.
Yeah. Happy New Year. All right. Monday night, you're watching. What are you thinking as that play unfolds when you have the tackle by Hamlin with T. Higgins?
Whew, so much to unpack here. Let's take it live in the moment as I'm sitting on the couch with my 7-year-old son who loves football even more than I did as an active player. He's just all into it. We're watching it, and in live time, the way that T. Higgins turned upfield made me as a defender say, oh, like this was an abrupt change of what you anticipated. That is not placing blame on him. That's just saying, oh, you caught me off guard. Now, when he caught him off guard with the head, helmet, crown to the neck, head area, tackle, all of that force also you're caught off guard, and it landed right on Damar Hamlin. Fine. He jumps up. Only thing that happened to me in that moment was like, whoo, that would have caught me. That would have hurt me a little bit. Whatever. He pops up, everything's fine. And then you realize everything's not fine. And what a tragic visual to see. Someone fighting for their life, not fighting in the NFL football sense for the next yard or the extra yard or for a touchdown, fighting to stay alive. And literally, I started crying. My son asked me two things in the moment. He's like, Dad, is he going to live? And then he follows that up by saying, Dad, I'm glad that didn't happen to you when you played football. And that's why I was crying, fighting it back to stay strong and show face for my family. But I really was emotional because I've taken thousands of hits. I've given thousands of hits. And to ever see that can be the reality, because I've never seen that on the football field. I've never experienced the death of any player. That's actually a conversation in our home. My son always asks, Dad, has anyone ever died playing football? And I always say heat exhaustion, training camp, but no one's ever died playing football. And in that moment, that was in jeopardy.
What about the idea of continuing to play that game at any point? Did you sense that the NFL was leaving open that window?
Absolutely, they were. And this is going to sound harsh, but they should have had to contemplate leaving that window open. Let me tell you why. The example I have is my mother passed away when I was an active player, 2005. And I remember when she passed away, the first thing I thought is life would never be the same. I thought I would never stop being preoccupied with the loss of my mother. And then I also thought going to bed that night that the sun wouldn't rise. I also thought that the clouds would cover the whole planet. I just thought everything was going to be different. And you know what happened the next day? This is the moment where I realized you have to compartmentalize no matter what you're going through in tragedy. I had to go to the doctor. I had to go to the mortuary. I had to go to the florist. I had to start making plans. Point being, there is someone's job, no matter how they're emotionally affected, to still keep the train on the tracks. They are preoccupied with something else. I fast forward to my mother's funeral, people are cracking jokes. People are laughing like, what are you going to serve when we get back to the house? and everyone's in a different lane, affected emotionally, but different tasks at hand. It felt harsh for me even to think about that. But I was talking to my wife in the moment. I was like, they have something to think about in this moment. Are they going to continue? Next man up mentality, or are they really going to stop this game? So it's not to say that they made the wrong or right decision. It meant that they had a decision to make.
Yeah, and I just wondered if they knew that Hamlin was going to be okay an hour later, and the players are still there, still in uniform, in their locker room. I wonder if they would have tried to squeeze that in.
Oh, absolutely. Like the bottom line interest was to continue to play that football game. The only thing that abrupted that was the fact that you didn't know how he was doing in terms of his condition. So when they started to look and say, oh, he fell down, oh, he got a concussion, whatever first steps, what you're thinking, the normal response. In that moment, the NFL is thinking, okay, you guys got a few minutes, probably go to the sidelines and we'll go back. But when it became a life and death situation without closure, the NFL finally had to suspend that game because they knew that those players couldn't come back to that field without closure. Any other injury we've seen, including concussion, including Tua, who stands up and then just passes out. When you have some form of closure or understanding of what's going on, you can proceed. But when you don't, obviously the NFL made the right choice finally, and they had to suspend it.
He's Marcellus Wiley, the former All-Pro defensive end and host of the podcast More to It, available on the Dan Patrick Podcast Network. You start to look at a couple other things with, you mentioned Joe Burrow. Like, what is it about Joe Burrow that you're seeing that shows or proves last year was not a one-off? This is who he really is.
Yes, between the ears with Joe Burrow, man. He has all the talent in the world, but it's more so his moxie, his mentality. You know how they started off this season, 0-2, started slow. And Joe Burrow is just someone you can hang your hat on. I think this team rallies around him, and more so, they believe in him because he believes that he can overcome all adversity. And that's what I'm seeing from this team. Like, they're greater than the sum of its parts. And they're a talented team, but they play even greater than that because of their belief system. It seems like there are 52 guys that believe in Joe Burrow, and he believes that he can conquer all. And when you have a leader like that, you start to feel invincible. You start to feel like, okay, I could do everything because I'm in connection, osmosis with the guy who can do it all. So Joe Burrow is scary because you can never count him out.
Is the opposite going on in Denver?
Yes and no. We were warned about Russell Wilson, and no one wanted to believe it and buy into it fully. We heard from teammate after teammate that he lacked leadership, authenticity. We heard from teammate after teammate that he's not the guy that we think he is. And I think we took that in terms of personality only. But some guys were actually saying, oh, he's not the baller you think he is. Top defense his first 4 years, top defenses usually. Great running game, Pete Carroll. And I think now we're starting to realize, oh, we should have given more credence to some of those conversations. But you know what they did in Seattle? They just cleaned the locker room of anybody who disagreed with Russell Wilson cooking. And now we're starting to realize maybe that wasn't the smartest decision. He lands in Denver. You have a first-year head coach. I'm sure he's trying to grind the same, checking all the same boxes. But when you don't have that in you, guys who don't have success with you are going to be sitting there doubting. Guys are going to be sitting on the outside saying, you got to bring me in if you're Russell Wilson, because your reputation is one thing. It preceded you, but it's not going to help lead me. And I think that's where we are right now in the crossroads of Russell Wilson having to galvanize, having to start this train and this momentum again, instead of carrying and riding with what he had in Seattle.
I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, and it sounded crazy to say it, but I still firmly believe it, that I needed less Aaron Rodgers for the Green Bay Packers to be successful. I needed the running game, and I needed the defense, and I needed Aaron Rodgers to come up with a couple of big plays. I just didn't need him to be the epicenter here. And maybe I'm crazy in saying that. It just feels like they're a better team when they run the football. That defense has stepped up, and then Aaron can now make a couple of throws with those young receivers.
I see where you're coming from, and I get it. At certain times, you need all Aaron Rodgers, especially early in the season, even in failure. You know why? With a roster full of guys who, especially in the receiving core, who are really trying to get their bones, they needed Aaron Rodgers to take those hits for them, need to be the leader that he is. But then what you're talking about is later in the season, those guys have to be so inspired and encouraged that they're actually productive, that they actually step up in a leadership role. So you basically got to activate those guys, but you got to be the first act if you're Aaron Rodgers. And I've been on teams like that before when you're like looking around, Junior Seau, Bruce Smith, somebody has to break the glass. And then we all can go run through and get what we want. And it's a situation where Aaron Rodgers, I think early in the season, he just had to go out there and show all these guys, hey, you can take your lumps. We can fall down. We will get back up. And you will stay alive, even in defeat. Now those guys believe that. They have the experience, and they have that leadership.
You mentioned on the podcast why LeBron's not loving the game the same. Why?
Yeah, LeBron James came out and said that playing basketball without winning is not in his DNA anymore. And on the surface, that sounds amazing. That sounds like a true winner. Like, oh, Jordan, look out. LeBron only plays when he wants to win, and he is winning. Then you take a step back, you know, like the old adage, no, it doesn't matter how smart you are if you don't stop and think. And you stop and think about that. You say, wait a minute, are you still in love with the process? Well, the results will make you think he is. Okay, are you still in love with your individual success and putting up 27-6? The results say you are. But then you start to realize, wait a minute, you're saying you don't love what you're doing unless there's team success. Does that matter if you are not having individual success? Does that even play into how you're approaching the game, processing the game, and preparing for the game? So I thought that even though it was supposed to be a hard stamp of I'm a winner or else, made me actually question a little bit more about LeBron James and how he's getting to this place. I know he's balling out of control, but sometimes the results can make us think different than the process.
And you know how this game is played, the media game and topics that you have on a show. And I was wondering, why is it that Kawhi Leonard doesn't get criticized? Anthony Davis does. He plays for the Lakers. If Kawhi played for the Lakers, then he would probably get criticized. I think the reason why he doesn't get criticized for not playing is he plays for the Clippers. I mean, is it that simple? If Anthony Davis played for the Clippers, he would not receive anywhere near this attention. And they're a better team than the Lakers.
Well, Anthony Davis didn't receive this attention in New Orleans either. No. And I get what you're saying to the point. As I look at my Clippers chair over there, I'm going to defend my team in a weird way. Have you ever noticed this dynamic? The team that loses in the Super Bowl feels worse than the team that didn't even make the playoffs. I've seen that 1,000 times. I felt that. I've never been in the Super Bowl, and I've been on teams that didn't make the playoffs. And then I talked to my boy who lost the Super Bowl, and he's dead. And I'm like, dude, I ain't even get a shot. I think that's happening with Anthony Davis versus Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard taps out. He's absent from those moments that we're so hypercritical. So we're not hypercritical of him. He doesn't even jump in. It's almost like the world is saying, you're better off not trying than trying and failing. And I see that happening a lot more in terms of the criticism, in terms of the spotlight on the guy.
Always great to talk to you. Appreciate your insights. Thank you.
All right. Take care, D.
That's Marcellus Wiley, former All-Pro defensive end and host of More to It, Dan Patrick Podcast Network.